Hey everyone, this is a little bit of situation update of what's happening. Trump, people inside the military, and then private corporations, some of the top aviation CEOs from the United States are meeting with Trump already now. So this will start leaking out. But this is also connected to Europe, and it has to do with chemtrails. Inside of Europe, silent disclosure projects are already happening. If you see through Poland, if you see through Czech Republic, through Austria, especially through Germany, they're beginning to expose the chemtrails so people can actually see it. What they're doing is they're leaving the skies unaffected with chemtrails. They let it clean for 7, 8, 9 days, and you have these blue skies. And after the blue skies come, it's clear days. And then around the evening time, they create all the grids in the skies so everybody can see it. And these are these perfect grids, and you can see it in all the countries. These are leading to disclosure projects, so people can share the information. People can have a huge, gigantic discussion about it. And this is going to open doors to investigations. And this is being pushed by the military alliance operations. Now, going back to the United States, these operations are going to start hitting the public sectors. It's going to start coming into the news, even into MSNBC. So this important operation of disclosing what's really going on with all of these aerosol sprays, what's going on with all of this technology that they're using, this geoengineering to change the climate, to affect the soils, and then other operations that's also connected to 5G, and then it's also connected to the climate change and a lot of different agendas. There are people, CEOs from these private aviation companies that are spraying some of this, and then people from the military whistleblowers, and then Congress already has a lot of whistleblowers. But right now, Trump is being briefed directly by a lot of people that's inside of these companies, the CEOs. So this disclosure project of all these chemtrails is going to come out, and it's going to lead to geoengineering, and then it's also connect over to a lot of deep, dark operations. At the same time, it's going to connect to non-government organization, NGOs. So you're watching a lot of these disclosure projects happening, but they're coming in stages. All of this was considered conspiracy a long time ago. People didn't believe that this was happening. But now there's huge discussion, especially in Europe, as people are actually seeing the evidence, and they're seeing it underneath these clear skies, and it lights up the whole skies with these huge, gigantic designs. So what's ever happening in the United States, I've been telling you, Europe is 2 years behind. While everybody was laughing at the United States when Biden was in office and Biden was looking weak, and Europe was just confused because there was no American leader, and everybody was actually really laughing at the United States. Now their countries are going to go into this collapse. Germany, France, UK, Canada, a lot of these countries are going inside their collapse now, and they're going to go through this for 2 years. So this huge collapse that's happening in Europe, in different countries, they are 2 years behind the United States. So now they're going to see all the corruption really unfold, and they're going to understand that mainstream media is swaying their votes. It's controlling their ideas even more than they thought during the pandemic. Now it's going to come out a lot of stuff that a lot of the left groups, the Democratic parties, is actually working with the middle right, like over in Germany. The people who won the elections, they still have to work with the liberals, with the democratic societies in order to pass all their agendas. That's why they're pushing the war. They have to vote because on the far right side, that power is rising. And the middle right and the left parties, they're fighting against the far right, who's exposing all the operations of the NGOs, the war profiteering, the corruption. So it has to happen, this huge collapse. There are military operations behind the scenes that's going to drop a lot of leaks. They're going to drop a lot of documents. A lot of intel agencies are going to be working with a lot of leaders throughout Europe to expose the corruption of the mainstream media, the corruption of their leaders, the corruption of the left. There's a massive, gigantic collapse that's coming. At the same time, that collapse is going to be connected to Trump creating a new financial system for the world. It's connected to the tariffs. And people are actually going to see a lot of stuff take place in the United States. Now, what's going to happen with X? They're going to move a lot of information to these countries of all the full corruptions. As you know, that Musk was talking about John Podesta, the pedo operations, the pizza, GATE stuff, and then all the corruption connected to NGOs. This goes on. What Musk has done was so massive, which is actually the United States military behind him, the USSF. Behind USSF are these huge, gigantic alliance relations that's using super intelligent computer systems and real intelligence. So these operations, to expose the operations over in Europe, it has to connect to a collapse. And all this is connected to exposing NATO. That's why the Ukraine war, exposing Ukraine, exposing the biolabs, exposing the financial money laundering system from the United States, the deep state, everything is coming in stages. Now, as we come closer to the collapse of NATO, this is really important. The reason why NATO, a military force, is attacking Russia, and who pushed all of these operations behind NATO, the exposure of Ukraine, the CIA running operations. There's a lot of things that you already know about of the corruption of NATO. You already know about the things with the CIA, the Pentagon, the deep state that was running operations to attack Russia, to try to break apart Russia into small pieces, to go after their GDP, to go after all the gold, to go after all the lithium underground. They had huge operations for a long time to go after Russia, and this stems back all the way from the early 1900s. This stems back to the Rothschilds. It stems back to the JEWS. It comes all the way back to the Khazars, the Khazarians, who are actually controlling a lot of these elite societies. And they still have a grudge against Russia for defeating Hitler. They still have a grudge for for stopping the Third Reich. They still have a grudge against Russia for many reasons. And that's why a lot of these operations, Operation Gladio, a lot of other secret operations to frame Russia, that Russia's the enemy. Those are money laundering operations. You know about that, to create wars, to create money. And that's why the deep state creates forever wars, is to run weapons, the weapons trade. So everything that you're watching, these full collapse that's actually happening in Europe, it's to expose NATO, expose different generals, commanders from different divisions that's inside of the NATO alliance, inside of these territories, inside of Europe. It's going to expose a huge money laundering system that's coming, where all the money, how a lot of these generals, these colonels, a lot of commanders inside of NATO, how they made money is going to connect over to the European banking system, to the United States banking system. There's huge, gigantic operations behind the scene to bring all of this down. Now, this is all connected to what's happening with NATO inside of Ukraine, what's happening with Russia. Now you hear about the UK, you hear about France. They're going to send soldiers into Ukraine to support them. There's a huge movement to kick off a war with Russia. This isn't anything new, especially if you've been following me from the beginning. I've been telling you a long time ago, even when Trump was still in office, I said, we're going to go towards a nuclear war, a nuclear conflict, a near-death civilization event. And this is going to lead close, really, really, really close to this nuclear war. We're going to come to the brink of it. I've been warning people about this for a long time, that this event was going to happen. But people said I was fear-mongering when I was on X. And I was talking about all of these events that I keep talking about over and over, from Musk, infiltrating the deep state that he was going to flip, and all of these operations. But I was also at the same time talking about Russia. I said, there's going to be a huge standoff with Russia. There's going to be a near nuclear war that's going to happen. And then at the same time, in the Middle East, everything's going to kick off huge. I was talking about this before anybody was even thinking about talking about these subjects. I was talking about this. Now, this event is vital to happen, especially inside of Europe, because the conservative power, especially the far-right leaning power inside of Europe, is taking hold, as a lot of conservatives have taken over, the liberal parties, the Democratic parties, the left side, and a lot of people inside the parliament, inside the European Union, they have been replaced with conservatives. But still, the conservatives are almost like the rhinos in the United States. That means like Republican in name only. So these conservatives are kind of neocons. They're kind of placed a little bit by deep state thinking, as you see in Germany with their new leader now that is trying to create war. The same with France, the same with UK. They're trying to create a war because there's huge panic that's happening. So all of these operations have to happen to where the German people have to become upset with the leadership that's happening inside of Germany as they try to facilitate a war. So the hidden deep state is already pushing all of these operations to have people to be arrested, to be silenced, to push all of these operations of huge censorship through Europe. Even inside of France, people can't run for presidency. People are being arrested. Inside of Europe, there's a huge civil unrest that's happening. It's creating and it's growing on a huge, massive stage. The alliance, the military intelligence is letting this happen. All through the wargaming, all through these operations of understanding 4th generation warfare, 5th generation warfare, 6th generation warfare. They understand how the people is moving, how the people is divided, and then they understand the outcome of what will happen, especially when they use these military operations of game theory operations. That means they let the deep state keep pushing this war agenda. They let the deep state keep dividing the people. But as this happened, the white hats, they give information inside of these vital moments. They let these leaks come out. They let certain reports hit the mainstream media outlets, especially through X, especially through certain leaders that's connected to military operations of where they get the information from. They let this information out into the public inside of Europe, the white hats, in vital moments when there's a huge collapse, because the people at that moment when they receive the information, they know that something is wrong, something is happening. So as Europe is going through a collapse, at the same time they're exposing the chemtrails. And a lot of people are posting the photos, the videos, and there's a bigger discussion than anybody has ever thought of in the past 20 years on chemtrails. That discussion is huge right now in Europe. Now the next discussion that's going to hit is the NGOs that are helping control elections. People are talking about a deep state inside of Europe for the first time, especially in Germany. People didn't want to talk about a deep state, but now something is going on. There's a deep state. The same in France, the UK, inside of Canada. People don't understand really that there are military operations that are vital that's happening to save their country and to expose all the corruption. But you have to let the corruption come near a collapse so you can give the information to the people in certain ways and certain disclosures, because that's going to, infuriate. It's going to get the people angry, that the people will want to fight for justice. The people will go to the streets. The people will go to the social medias, and everybody will connect in their own way, in their own sources, their own groups, their own communities, to push the real information. Then they'll understand there's a huge cover-up also too of censorship. And when that happens, when there's a huge civil unrest, that's when the new leaders will come forward. That's when the leaders that were pushed away, that were telling the truth, they will come back to power. So that's going to happen inside of Germany when we talk about the AfD, what Musk is doing behind the scenes, what Vance is doing behind the scenes. Behind the scenes over in Canada, Musk has people, administrators inside the financial systems that's already meeting with the financial ministry over in Canada. At the same time, military operations inside the Pentagon, the White Hats, are meeting with Canadian military officials at the high-ranking commands, the highest-ranking generals. So there's a lot of operations in place to expose the deep state. And I keep telling you, these are world operations. This is a world military sting operation. And there's a huge alliance that's working together. So the exposure of NGOs, the exposure of climate change, the exposure of vaccines, this is going to expose also the dangers of technology, of what's really happening. As RFK keeps moving forward, there are people behind him inside the United States Health of Human Services and Intelligence who are looking deeply into the nanotechnology that's inside the mRNA and then the heavy metals. Now, this is connected to the 5G because those heavy metals, nanotechnology, is self-assembling inside the brain, inside the heart, inside different parts of the body. These heavy metals are coming together, and people are really concerned because when an electrical magnetic frequency hits these particles, they come together, they assimilate themselves. So there's a huge discussion right now about the dangers of what this 5G was creating, that was connected over to creating the vaccines with the nano and the heavy metals inside of it. So this exposure is part of the agenda of what Trump, the military, is doing behind the scenes to expose all of these operations of the vaccines. And that's happening right now. That's being discussed at the highest levels inside the military, human health services, and this is what RFK is talking about with certain scientists right now. So Trump, the military alliance, is trying to paint you a picture that they're trying to create these wars to cover up all the human pedo operations, the human trafficking that's connected to Epstein, that's connected to the United States banking systems, connected to the elites. And all of these elites, including like Les Wexner, they were inside different gay relationships. They were doing stuff to little boys. And this is huge. It's massive because this goes into the weapons trade. And this is the reason why Epstein was over with Prince Andrews, because Prince Andrews was running weapons trade over to Libya. He was running weapons trades over to the Middle East. He was running weapons trades over to Malaysia. This huge, gigantic weapons trade to create wars, with what happened in Libya, with Gaddafi. Prince Andrews was working on both sides. He was funding Gaddafi with new weapons. At the same time, he was also giving it to the other people who the Democrats were funding the war with, because they didn't want people to find out that Clinton's, the CIA, were funding the Libya forces. They were funding them with weapons, they were funding them with money. So all of those operations was given over to the UK with Mossad, MI6, and went over to Prince Andrews, who at the same time was working over with Epstein and the money that he was being financed through Wexner, JP Morgan. So this huge, gigantic cover-up, from the human trafficking to creating wars, overthrowing countries, this is what the huge panic is all about also. At the same time, Trump creating these tariffs, creating a new financial system in the world, is vital to stopping the forever wars, because a lot of these tariffs that's going to happen, it's going to be a huge, gigantic ripple effects. It's going to lead to new executive orders as Trump finds out. Well, he already knows what's happening, but when Trump, gives that calms to the United States that he knows who created the Ukraine wars, who was really behind it, the deep state generals in the United States, people inside of NATO, certain banking systems, the structures, as Pam Bondi, Kash Patel move forward, exposing the coup, the stolen elections, and then as Musk exposes a huge $1 trillion money laundering operation that's connected also over to the CIA, the deep state, the military industrial complex moving money. Trump is going to create new executive orders. Then he's going to create new tariffs on different countries for funding these forever wars, for the corruption, for the hidden money laundering systems. And Trump is going to put tariffs on all these different countries for computer chips. We get a lot of products to create weapons. We get this from different European countries. We get different metals from Russia. We get different metals that come in from the UK. We get different resources that is coming over from Canada, different countries. We get all of these different products from around the world to create weapons. And those weapons is being run by the deep state, which is the military industrial complex system that is creating forever wars on the behalf of the elites, the globalists, and that's how they're getting money. This huge, gigantic tariff, these new executive orders that Trump is going to sign after the exposure of a lot of these things that's happening with NATO, that's going to come later in the year. That's going to be the exposure of who created the Ukraine war with the neocons, with the Bidens, with the Clintons behind it, with Obama. This huge, gigantic exposure that's going to come out, because as Europe goes towards a near nuclear war with Russia, Trump is going to step back a little bit. Now there's going to be panic inside of Europe, and everybody has to fight against their system. The people are going to be in panic. There's going to be a lot of panic because of cyber attacks, false flag events, and then they're going to know that the media is lying to them, that their leaders are lying to them, guiding them silently into a war. And as their financial system starts to collapse, the people are going to fight. The people are going to be guided secretly. That are game theory operations. The military is silently guiding people, but they don't understand it. So those game theory operations of exposing NATO, the wars. Now Trump, at the same time, is going to create tariffs against European countries. He's going to create it against Europe. He's going to create against all these other countries. When he creates these new executive orders, that's going to be on taxes, that's also going to be connected to the tariffs. All these people that sell their supplies, all these people that sell microchips, all these people that sell different kind of products to make all these different weapons, different guns that the United States uses, that's going to create a huge, gigantic collapse inside of the weapons trade inside of the United States. So Trump's tariffs is connected to bringing down the deep state, bringing down the forever wars, and bringing down the financial system of the deep state money laundering operations connected over to the military industrial complex system and their fraudulent money laundering operations. So now you get an understanding why Trump is creating the External Revenue Service, why he's creating tariffs, why he's taxing countries. Just like I gave you just a small insight. UK doesn't produce a lot of aluminum or a lot of steel, but what it does is the MI6, the Mossad, the deep state in the UK, they run all the minerals from different countries into the UK that they buy. And the MI6, they're these shell companies, they sell it into the United States, and then the United States finances it and buys those products, aluminum, different stuff to create missiles, to create weapons, and these go to the military industrial complex systems, like over to Wetworks, over to Raytheon. So Trump is going to create a huge tariffs on a lot of these countries that were selling products to create weapons, and then including China with microchips, a lot of their precious metals, the different metals that they have for creating very advanced weapons inside the United States. Now this huge ripple effect is going to create chaos inside of the markets. There's going to be a huge, gigantic collapse as these shell companies that is working for the deep state to create the weapons trade, to create the wars, and this is connected to money laundering operations through all these shell companies, through UK, through Europe, inside the United States, inside of Canada. There's going to be a huge, gigantic collapse that's going to keep on increasing. And as the United States grows into a superpower in this next year, into 2026, you're going to see an explosion maybe around November into January, February of next year. The United States economy is going to blow up. It's going to increase, and it's going to keep on growing, and then it's going to take over, almost like in a way where people are going to want that United States money. They want to save taxes. Now Trump is going to have a huge, gigantic leverage over Germany. He's going to have a huge, gigantic leverage over France. He's going to tell them, if you want to revive, trade, if you want to, bring economy back, bring your GDP back up, if you want to work in a certain way with me, with our country of the United States, you have to expose your corruption. You have to tell the truth of what happened in Ukraine. Because in the United States, the military coup that happened, that's going to be exposed. The 2020 elections is going to be exposed. Kash Patel, Bondi, Trump's team, Department of Justice, even inside the DOD, they're going to expose the full operations of what really happened. That's all going to connect to Ukraine. That's all going to connect to all the corruption. There is so much behind the Epstein that's connected over to the weapons trade. There's a lot of corruption in Ukraine that's connected to the weapons trade, to all the $500 billion that was sent to Ukraine. That's connected to the weapons trade, that's connected to the military industrial complex system. Trump is silently moving forward to end these forever wars, to stop all of these money laundering operations that's working with the deep state, that's financing these wars, that's connected to people selling metals, different microchips, different resources, wires, that's all connected to building these weapons. There's going to be a huge, gigantic ripple effect through China, Hong Kong, to UK banking systems, into Europe. that weapons trade of all of these metals to create weapons. Trump is going after that. That's what a huge part of these tariffs are going after. But also the United States has grown to a superpower. Now everybody will have to listen. Now all these countries who want good trading with the United States, who need to grow their GDP, who are on the Wall Street Stock Exchange, Trump's new system is his financial system that he's going to create. Everybody's going to want to be a part of this. Now they have to expose the deep state that Trump is talking about. So a lot of these countries right now, they're inside a collapse. Inside of Germany, inside of France, inside of these different European countries, Canada, there's a lot of infighting going on. But I keep telling you, they're 2 years behind of what's happening in the United States. By the time Trump comes back into making the United States a world superpower, these people are going to be asking for help. These people that, that were like Bill Maher, that were talking shit about Trump, all these different countries that were talking shit about Trump, all these people are going to be begging for help. These leaders that were talking shit, not the people, but the leaders that were talking crap about Trump, talking crap about the United States, they're going to be begging for help because they're going to also be inside this exposure part of all this information that's going to be connected to a huge fraudulent system, corrupt system inside our countries. That's why Germany's vital. That's why I kept mentioning Germany inside of this drop today, because behind the scenes, there's going to be a huge, massive exposure, but also a huge collapse. And you always have to remember, the military just can't come in and save countries. That's not how it works. The people must look like they were fighting to save their country. They must be a part of it. They must see the pain. They must see the collapse. They must see the money disappear that they have in their banking systems. They must feel that power, that leverage that is taking them down. Only until then will they see the corruption. Only until then will they want to fight and to unite together to better their countries. And they have to see the corruption of the MSM, mainstream media. The exposure of mainstream media is happening on a wide level, but the United States MSM is collapsing. Now that collapse is going to start happening inside of Europe. You're watching a lot of these operations that you don't understand of what Trump is doing with the External Revenue Service, with the tariffs, with all of this to bring down this deep state operations that is creating a lot of these forever wars. So this is the reason why the deep state, the CIA operations with Malta, the Jesuits from the Vatican that works with the Rothschilds, the Rockefeller families, and the elite global families all together are trying to create a world war, a nuclear war, because they're scared of all of these exposure of the human trafficking rings, overthrowing countries, the coup operations, the exposure of the United States coup that happened in 2020, all the exposure that's going to come from South American elections over to the Romania elections, all of these different operations that's been happening through the world where they've been overthrowing countries, running sex pedo operations. Now they're scared of this Epstein because the military already has all the records, they have all the data, they have all the servers, they have all the terabytes that's on these global elites, their corporations, their CEO heads. And Epstein and the gay affairs that he was having with certain people like Wexner, who is very important inside of these CIA operations with JP Morgan. He's connected to a lot of operations that's connected to intel agencies, intelligence software creations for the CIA, for different agencies. So you got to be patient as you see that it's not about just the U.S. election, It's just not about liberals. It's just not about the United States. It's about the whole world that is inside this huge, massive corruption system. And Trump, the military behind him, is bringing down these operations with an alliance from different countries. That's why this is really important, what Trump is doing with the tariffs, the taxes, what's going to happen with Epstein, the exposure of the coup, the exposure of all of these lockstep operations of getting people sick through all of these chemtrails and then through the vaccines, what they were doing with the mRNA and how they're nanos and they're, how they're inside the body and they're affected through these 5G frequencies that unites these nanoparticles. So there's a lot of these operations that are coming out, and they're coming out in certain ways and stages, but they're all going to connect. Everything is going to connect, from Epstein to the vaccines to the pandemic. Nothing is over yet. Everything is only beginning. Remember, Trump is back in office now. It's only been 2 months, and you're watching all of these operations unfold together.